can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Sam Adcock of Ortus Club. And before I formally introduce you, Sam, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. Since you're an agency owner, we have Todd Taskey was a great one. He talks about how do you sell your agency, and he kind of does that with private equity and talks about the second bite. So check out, and he's got a great podcast, The Second Bite. Ian Garlic, who does video case stories, and he talks about some of the unique marketing he did and even his dad did for a restaurant. They had live dolphins in the restaurant, and that restaurant, Sam, was in Wisconsin, so it wasn't like in some sunny place. Also, because you deal with a lot of tech companies, I know, Sam. We had Zapier, founder Zapier on, Pipedrive on, Aweber on. Those are all great episodes as well. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for you to launch and run your podcast. We provide the accountability, the strategy, and full execution. And for me, Sam, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade than to profile the people and companies I admire on this planet and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com to learn more. And today I have Sam Adcock. He founded the Ortus Club in 2016 while in Manila. And he started his career, this is interesting, as a subsea engineer after graduating from Oxford University as a mechanical engineer. So we'll find out how you landed at Ortus Club after that. And their clients include companies like Microsoft, Zendesk, Dell, IBM, Adobe, PayPal, Zoom. Now, they don't only just help tech companies, but a lot of companies, small, medium-sized businesses. But for some reason, tech companies are just attracted to you. And he also started mClub, which is an agency group, as a spinout from the Ortus Club. And Sam, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jeremy. Delighted to be here.
So tell people about Ortus Club and what you do.
Ortus Club, effectively, if you look at it on a website, it's always not clear. But if you speak to me, what I'll say, it's a specialist B2B marketing agency. We help our clients get in front of the right people, typically executives from other businesses, and allow them to build relationships and ultimately helping them sell their service. Now, we do that through a niche way. We do that typically running dinner discussions, roundtables, virtual roundtables, very intimate, small events where we're bringing a select group of typically senior people together for topical discussion. And then our client will be positioned as a host, they're effectively a sponsor, and they'll use that as a platform to build relationships and do business.
I love it.
That's what we
it's
do.
so powerful, the human connection, the relationship. And I want to talk pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, or during pandemic and post-pandemic. But before we do, so let's walk through a scenario, okay? I know you worked with Stripe before. How did that work?
So Stripe is an ongoing client of ours, and I couldn't tell you how they came in touch, but everyone's been saying they're gearing up for an IPO for some time now. So growth. They want to grow. And this was in Asia Pacific where we started. We started in Manila, and so we have a track record there. They'd come to us and say, we want to penetrate these specific industries. We want to go after logistics companies. We want to go after IT service providers. We want to go after the FSI, financial banks and financial institutions. And then we'd put together a plan of dinners or intimate events where they would be talking something that they could align themselves with, or a problem that they're trying to solve. It might be the future of payments, or it might be the changing landscape of the payments for e-commerce. Whatever that topic that they want to align themselves with, we would come up with a series of roundtables where they can really just position themselves as the experts and the problem solvers. we bring in the CEOs, we bring in the CFOs to discuss their issues and talk about the problems that they have running their respective companies. And then there would be Stripe at the center of that table, at the center of that event, ideally positioning themselves as problem solvers. So yeah, Stripe is one of our clients, and they've actually grown from doing the one roundtable to doing many in different countries, be them dinners. And we do a lot of dinners now. We do mainly dinners. But I think they came to us during the pandemic, and you said, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. Well, during pandemic, well, I don't know what you call that, but during pandemic, it was all about virtual. Everybody couldn't meet. And so we were very fortunate to be one of the only types of events company that could really thrive, because large events was off the table, or if people did do them, they were useless. No one enjoyed them. But roundtables, intimate events where everybody could actually speak and interact and really involve themselves in the conversation, they thrived. And that's what we focused on, and that's all that we do. So we were lucky there.
Sam, what frequency do you recommend for Stripe? I'm sure they're all companies are different.
I saw a statistic that Stripe has got kind of 2,000 salespeople. So when you've got 2,000 salespeople, you can run an event. You can run 5 a day, and you're not going to service all your salespeople. You're not going to get enough leads for your salespeople. But yeah, it depends. It depends on the size of your company. We run a lot of events for ourselves. So we're going after CMOs or heads of business development, typically from the tech community, but it varies outside that occasionally. We're running about 3-4 a month. We'd like to do more, but it's time intensive.
That's what I was going to say. I would love for you to walk through the process, because there's so many moving pieces here, right? Like for Stripe, let's say they want to get manufacturing companies, right? Stripe, I don't know. It feels like they dominate the market to me. Maybe that's true. But let's say there's a manufacturing company. The process is you would have to reach out, get attendees, or do they have a list of people that they want to invite? Start there for a second.
Interesting you say that you think they dominate the market. I mean, they do have the largest market share, but there are some competitors out there that are nearly as big. It's just they really focus on the enterprise clients. And so Stripe have a massive tail, and they pick up a lot of SMEs. So being a smaller company or be a consumer, you hear about them a lot more, because literally a company of one can have a Stripe account and use it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're getting the market share.
They want to penetrate the larger enterprise company.
Well, now they want to try to penetrate the larger enterprise company. They always have, but now that's what they want to focus on. And that's where we come in. Our solution is to help clients who really want to get in front of enterprises, the Fortune 500 or the large enterprises, wherever they are in the world. That's when they engage us, where the deal sizes are large. So, sorry, I've lost train of the question.
No, so the question was about, are you having to source and reach out to these people, or do the companies typically have a list that you can invite? Because there's very different processes, for you.
Yeah. So we're not magicians, meaning if you give us, and we're dealing with people, which means if you give us a wish list, right, we'll work with that. We'll do our very best to get those people in the room, and we're pretty good at what we do. That's why we're at the stage we're at now. I always say I dedicated my life to this craft, which is hard, which is true. You're just getting something seemingly simple, getting people, sending them an invite and getting them to accept a dinner invitation, which is always free in a really nice location, typically the nicest restaurant the city can provide, whichever city that is, and invite them along with peers for interesting discussion. You think it would be easy getting people to say yes?
I don't think it's easy because sometimes getting people off their couch is hard, right? I mean, even to get someone to show up with Zoom is not necessarily easy, So and people are busy, especially the people you're contacting. They're super busy.
Exactly. They're super busy. They have very limited time, and we're asking them to give up their evenings normally. So yeah, it is tough. So we're not magicians, but typically clients will give us a target list, a wish list, or they'll give us a brief, and we'll put together their wish list for their approval. Yeah, and
That's tough.
That's the starting.
So
starting
typically,
point.
either you'll map out you'll map out their ideal client with them, and either they'll have a wish list of specific companies, or you'll create one, and then present it to them, and then from there you do the invitations, right? So talk about. No, is there another step I'm missing?
No,
okay. Then from there
really
you do the invitations.
I mean, sometimes sometimes they'll just give us a paragraph of what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And then we used to put, sometimes they give us a paragraph, and we used to then present to them a wish list and put time into formulating the wish list. And this is the other thing. We do that still now. You can put that paragraph they give you into ChatGPT, and it kicks out a very beautiful list of companies. It's a starting spot. And from there, you hone it down to the companies that they want.
So talk about, you should reverse that and say, we are magicians. Because if they give you a paragraph, and then you create a list and invite people and have them show up to a dinner, that's pretty magical. But what do you find over the years worked well with sending these invitations, and what did not work well?
Yes. So it can be very hard. Some dinners go very smoothly, and every single person in the room is a target. We call A star target for the prospect, and all it required was a couple of outreach campaigns, be that through email or through social media or through our telesales teams, and it's gone very, very smoothly. And it can be really, really hard to discern exactly why that is. Like a lot of things, like, I don't know, let's say you're a footballer and you have a really good game. I'm talking soccer here, not
I was going to say European soccer. Or
let me say, but it can work. I'm sure I've never played football, but I'm sure it's the same. Like, you come off the field and you think, "My God, that was a great game. If only I could just do that again, then the rest of my life is going to be easy. I'm going to be an all-star." But it's so hard to discern exactly why that game went so smoothly, that game went so well. Like, you can try and recreate it. Okay, well, if I get up and have enough sleep, I eat the right food. It's the same with dinners. Like, we can try and discern exactly why it went so smoothly, and we got the best people in the room. It could be to do with the topic, it could be the venue, it could be to do with the timing, it could be done with the sales team that are working on it. But in truth, there's an element of randomness. But all you can do is control what you can control, and set yourself up, or give yourself as much chance as possible for success. So when speaking to the guests, we ask them, "So why is it that you decided to respond to this request and not others?" And they were like, "Well, you're right. I do get a lot of invitations. Why did I come to this?" And it's always a mixed bag. Like, I think the level of intimacy, the fact that these are very, very targeted events and we reach out on a very personable level, helps. The fact that we have it in a very, very luxurious dining room, again, typically the nicest dining room in that respective city that money can buy, that helps. Typically that we have an interesting conversation that's relatable, that's particularly pertinent, and that's been carefully researched, so that, one, we know that it is relevant to the guests in the room and they're going to find it of interest, but two, it's closely aligned to what the client is delivering, and so that they get value out of that conversation. That helps. I think that you can see who else is going to be there. Your peers are going to be there, and you know that if you go along, you get a chance to actually learn and share knowledge with your peers. And you're not just going to sit there and just listen to, the keynote speaker like you do at a lot of these other events, which can be a bit dull and boring. and the guy speaking at the front is paying to be there and delivering a message that they want you to hear, not necessarily what's interesting. I think that helps. We try to keep our discussions independent. Yes, there's a sponsor behind it. Like, we're not hiding that. But we try and keep the chairperson independent, impartial, so the conversation is genuine, real, and authentic.
Yeah. I want to talk about
helps.
the format, but from the reach out perspective, like you said, they're busy people. It sounds like you're doing kind of multi-channel, not just email, maybe social media, but you're also calling as well.
Yeah, every single channel we can get our hands on. It helps. It helps if someone receives invitations from multiple different sources.
I'm curious in the messaging, as people start to say yes, are you mentioning other people who are coming? And is there an ideal size?
Yeah. Good question. The answer is yes, we are using the job titles of the companies, typically of people who have agreed to attend, to help market it. And sometimes what we'll do even is just plant a couple of key participants who aren't necessarily prospects for the client, but we think really add value to the conversation and will be a huge contribution to the quality of the discussion. There can be academics, thought leaders, key peers in that particular realm. We'll reach out to them and invite them to come along, and they can be a massive asset and an attraction.
Yeah.
Size 10 to 15. Any more, too big. Just it's not interactive. Any less, and it works, but you're missing out on you're missing out on the quantity for your client as well, because they're looking at the ROI, and so they want more than 10 people there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, there's maybe some anchor people that add a lot of value, and then that starts to get the flywheel turning, and then as more people say yes, there's just more higher level people coming.
Yeah,
so
it's momentum for sure. There's momentum with these things.
It's not easy what you do, actually. If anyone's put on, whether it's small or large event, just mobilizing people is not easy. So you have the ideal client, you map that out, you start doing reach out, you find an amazing venue, and what's the best format that you find once people are there?
The agenda?
Yeah.
So a typical agenda would be, there's a small drink reception at the start, get people relaxed. Wine helps for many reasons, and definitely gets people more relaxed and talkative, which is important for these things. We'll move through to the dining room, get people sat down. There's a master of ceremonies who will introduce proceedings, and that would be a member of the Ortus Club typically. Will then introduce the client as the hosts, and they will be say a few words of introduction, but we'll police that, making sure that it's not too salesy. I think that's important. And then we'll go around the room. Everybody will introduce themselves, and the chairperson will tee up that discussion for 5 minutes or so and just set the scene before having 3 or 4 questions that they want to work through during the roundtable. For the dinners, we're sat at the table we're going to be eating at. So after the kind of first couple of questions, the servers will typically bring out the starters, and so people can start. And then as the discussion comes to a close and is concluded by the chair, the mains come out, and it turns more into a network. Well, the discussion can continue, but the formal part of the discussion is over and the networking starts. We sometimes move people around the table so that they can meet more than just the people sat down next to them. The client gets the chance to cover the entire room, and it's very smooth.
Yeah. Who from the company do you really recommend being there? And then, or do you recommend multiple people from the company being there?
The question is,
from
do we
like
recommend?
Stripe, like let's say Stripe,
Okay.
who from the
Yeah.
company from Stripe do you recommend being there, and then
Yeah.
how many people?
So let's say Stripe are selling to CFOs, right? Then the ideal would obviously be the peer would be there because it's a peer discussion, but that's not always possible. So, um, just three or four, three say represent senior account managers, representative from the client will be sat around the table. Um, and yeah, typically any more than that, it comes across as a bit too crowded. The ratio is a bit skewed. So we recommend about three. And then there's the chairperson who's impartial, independent, not typically from the client side. Then there's the master of ceremonies who tends to be from Ortus, who just makes things run smoothly, makes sure the restaurant is on time, make sure the lighting is right. Anything that's going wrong, they'll pick it up.
Yeah, when I look at your site, Sam, you've done these in over 100 countries. So there's a lot of logistics involved. What do you recommend as far as follow-up? So now dinner goes amazing, right?
Yeah.
How does follow-up work?
Okay. So after every project, now this is an initiative I'm trying to get my team, and clients to see is we're more than just a events company. Yes, you look at our website, okay, we do nice dinners, we do nice events, but the real reason we're doing this is sales, is pipeline, is generation of sales pipeline for our clients. And that is done at the follow-up. So if the follow-up is done badly or not done at all, then the whole project was just completely stupid. It was pointless. So the follow-up is crucial. And so I like to think of when we sell a project, we think of it as projects rather than events, because it's so easy to think, okay, my job is done, the event's over, I can now go home and relax. So that's not true. That's just one element of the project. The project ends when the follow-ups and the pipeline have been built. So in any project, there's the attendees, there's always dropped on the days, dropped before, like there's lots of conversation, and there's lots of in communication actives. We generated a lot of conversation on the lead up to the event with people who, for whatever reason, couldn't actually make the event. They couldn't find a babysitter, they got called away because the child is sick, whatever it may be. They can't come, but they're still engaged. And we don't want that to go to waste. So we're putting a lot of effort into the follow-ups and the pipeline generation post and actually during the acquisition stage. So we'll sit down. So post-project, we'll sit down with the client and say, okay, here's the attendees. Who out of these would you like to follow up yourself, or who would you like us to help with? And we'll just put our name next to the people where we are responsible for following up. And if they're responsible for following up, we'll put their name next to it and provide all the details. If it's us, our first action is to try and set up a one-to-one where we'll call them up. If it's attendee, they've come along, they've had a nice time, they've met the client, they've had a really nice evening and had some genuinely interesting discussion, and they've learned a lot. So when we give them a call, and then 75% of the time they'll go, absolutely, yeah, I'll take a call with the sales executive. They paid for my dinner, so it works out really well. For the drops as well, it works out very well because they, to a degree, and if they haven't already, we subtly turn the screw. They have an element of guilt for not showing up. Like, these things don't happen for free, and they understand that it's hard to put on. So if they dropped, we can usually use that in our favor to help set up a one-to-one. Now, we don't want people just to attend a meeting because they feel guilty, but it does help. And then there's the in communication actives who are just interested in the topic and will use that open communication channel, because half the battle with these executives is actually opening up the channel of communication. Once the channel is open, and I mean, yeah, that's half the battle. It's very, very hard. Most of the people just ignore you. But if the channel is open, you can then ask them directly, well, I'm sorry you couldn't make it, but we were going to be discussing this, and the client would like to discuss this with you. Would it be possible to set up a one-to-one? And that's how we get a lot of our follow-up.
Yeah. So you'll set up a one-on-one with someone from the company to have that conversation.
Correct.
Yeah. No, you make a really good point, which is someone who doesn't come is still engaged in the process and still could be quite interested in this, even if they don't show up. So there's a lot more of a pool of people than just the people who show up to the dinner.
Yep. And another thing that we're doing now, we started doing a lot more of, is curated insights. Off the back of these events, there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of insights that are genuinely valuable and interesting to people who didn't show up. And one of the developments of 2023 has been how rapid and quick it is to summarize large swaths of information. So we're able to condense that into very valuable insights with the help of AI and send that out to everybody that was invited, and collect data and information on who is actually engaging with that content and feed that back onto the client. And they're finding that very useful.
I love that. Curated insights, because then you're kind of summing it up, giving everyone a synopsis, and not everyone maybe in every conversation. Even people who aren't able to attend, you can share with them as well. Are you how do you find the best way to collect that? Is someone there taking notes on what the conversation is? Do you have an after call with them, or how do you best find to get those curated insights?
Well, on virtual roundtables, it's very easy, because closed captions, you just copy and paste. And I would love for it to be as easy with physical roundtables. You can have a dictaphone, and they're pretty good now at creating that, but it's hard to know who was speaking when. So there is someone there taking notes, a bit of both.
Got it. So we talked about, in this scenario, a live in person, right? But I know pre-pandemic, you were 30 people. During, you grew to 120 people. What does an event look like via Zoom or virtual?
Well, we try and recreate what we managed to do in the physical realm, in the virtual realm. And at the beginning of the pandemic, people didn't get it. I think people are so much more literate now on Zoom than they ever were before. I'm not sure if that's a word, but I just used it. Zoom literacy, like they wouldn't have their cameras on. They didn't really understand the etiquette behind being on a round table. Now everyone's very familiar, and they understand that having your camera on and engaging in the chat and using the features to like raise your hand is like a part of business etiquette. So I think it's a lot easier now than it was at the beginning of the pandemic to actually host a successful roundtable. The issue is people are just less inclined to accept. I think before it was quite easy. And we were obviously, the first reaction when the pandemic hit was fear, because every single client cut every single budget with us, and we were down to zero, having spent five years building this up. There was nothing left. And then when I realized I could slightly pivot it and actually offer Zoom or virtual offerings instead, it was then we were ecstatic, because suddenly we were delivering a similar product with half of the hassle. And we didn't have to worry about traveling there. We didn't have to worry about
more than half the hassle.
Yeah, a lot more than half that. Well, yeah, in terms of logistics, there was no hassle. So we were ecstatic. And also, the profit margins were obviously better, and we could do more. So I think that's, and people were really looking around for innovative ways. The marketing budgets didn't go away, but they just didn't have anywhere to spend it. So we were, for the first time in our history, we were turning away business just because we couldn't handle it. which is a great place to be. But we tried to like recreate the intimacy of our physical roundtables and the interactive nature of our physical roundtables in the virtual world. And we tried to recreate the event. So when Zoom calls and just Zoom calls became a bit stale, we would come up with new initiatives, red wine and roundtable, where we'd send everyone a very nice, highly rated Vivino bottle of red, typically from Bologna or a nice area in France. And they could enjoy that while on the call. And there would be a sommelier who would get up at the beginning on the call and talk you through the red that you were enjoying and the intricacies of that profile. And that was fun. And that still happens. It's just in terms of the inquiries, it's just all in person. And I'd love to try and shift it more. And I'm trying to incentivize it more to virtual. But it's not what people want.
What are some other ways you recreate the intimacy? I love the kind of innovative idea. So you have the red wine bottles, you have the sommelier. What are some other things that you've been able to do to recreate that via Zoom or virtual?
Whiskey tasting, lunch deliveries. We started experimenting with like a very quick icebreaker games at the beginning. So this really came from actually the end of day meetings that we have in the company. The company now is spread out in 3 different time zones. Most of us are still in Manila. I'm in Rome now, and we have a team in New York. And so, yeah, I mean, trying to recreate the small startup energetic vibe that we had when we were all based in one office in Manila is tough. So we meet every day on an end of day meeting to play games, literally like company-wide games. And some of them work very well. And so we try to bring that to some of our events. One of our favorite games is a game called GeoGuessr. I don't know if you've seen it. I kind of saw it on TikTok. What it is it puts you somewhere randomly on Google Maps somewhere in the world. And you've got 20 seconds or whatever time you set to work out on a map where in the world you think you are. And the closest to the pin gets the most points. That's a lot of fun. And everyone can just use a link and start playing.
What is it called again?
GeoGuessr.
Okay.
GeoGuessr.
Got it.
There's a whole, like a lot of these things, there's a massive online community with some people with far too much time on their hands who've got far too good at this game. But it's fun.
It's like a virtual version of like a reality show where they basically just drop you with 3 tools. I think I forgot what it's called, Alone or something. They give you like 7 tools and they just drop you somewhere you don't know and you have to survive. A little bit different, but
yeah. But it's got to a point where, I mean, not in our company, but it's got to a point where people can look at an asphalt road and work out based on the quality of the asphalt or how it's cracked in which country they are. Yeah. It's quite incredible.
So GeoGuessr, what's another one that's a fan favorite?
Yeah. What's the quiz? The quizzes we played this morning. Kahoot quizzes. So we'd come up with quick quizzes, and everyone could just log on their phone and as fast as finger first. Even yesterday we were playing Tetris, but it's like multiplayer Tetris. It's not just one, so you can see where everybody's at. Everybody knows how to play Tetris, but you can get 100 people playing Tetris at the same time and see clearly who's winning.
What's a fun icebreaker that you've found throughout the years?
Well, they're fun icebreakers.
Are there typically games, or are there like opening questions that you want people to share?
It's hard it's hard at a dinner table to do games.
Yeah, exactly.
I think actually we tried once, two truths and a lie. That's always fun. The thing is, this is the first time people have ever met. So two truths and a lie, or two lies and a truth. I'm never sure which one it is.
Yeah, two truths and a lie. Exactly.
But you want to keep the introductions quick at dinner tables. You want to get into the meat of the event. So it would be an icebreaker question like, what are you watching on Netflix? If it wasn't for the pandemic, where would you have traveled to next?
Yeah.
Yeah. We just keep the introductions quick and sharp. And just because we want to, there's 15 people around a table. So
you have some really cool companies, Sam, that you've worked with. And I suppose you eat your own dog food. This is how you work with these companies, because you do the same thing for yourself as you do for your clients. One of the clients was Cloudflare. What did you do with them?
There is interesting. I mean, there we're working with them on a global contract. And Cloudflare is another pandemic company that just saw huge growth as more people lived their lives digitally. But they were looking for growth across the dinners were great, and they were using that for their enterprise segments where the deal sizes were large, but they don't want just to go after the enterprise clients. They also wanted to go down the ladder and maybe target more of the medium size or SME accounts. So in that case, dinners don't really offer the return of investment because there's only 15 people in a room. And if you're give you a ballpark somewhere between 15 to 20,000 US dollars for a project, it wouldn't necessarily give you the prospects to justify the return of investment. So they wanted to go after a larger pool and get larger volume. They were looking for volume. So we came up with a roadshow, a masterclass roadshow there all across the States. I think it was 13 different cities over the span of 3 months across North America, where we would be getting between 60 to 100 prospects in a room. Obviously, we couldn't do an interactive discussion because you can't have 60 to 100 people in an interactive discussion.
The introductions would take an hour.
The introductions would take more than an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But there, the agenda would be an interesting panel discussion, a fireside chat, some keynote speakers, obviously the drinks reception and the buffet dinner as such. And so we were able to go around the US and actually roll out a very large campaign in which they were meeting and building sales relationships with a much larger volume of people than they would have done through just dinner discussions. Yeah. And we executed that towards the back of last year. And based on the return of investment on that, they're looking to do something similar in 2023 as well.
Sam, what was it? Again, I mentioned the beginning, subsea engineer, right? Mechanical engineer, and now you're doing this, right? So like my background's in biochemistry as a chiropractor. So it's people are probably often like, okay, how'd you get to the Ortus Club from this journey? What happened in 2016?
Yeah, very good question. So I quickly realized that subsea engineering or working for a large corporation, it wasn't just engineering, but just working for a very large corporation, where I was impatient probably, and I wanted the things to happen quicker. So the only way to do that is either start your own company or start your own company. So Ortus was probably my third attempt at a company where the barrier wasn't in something so high tech that it would have taken a decade in order to get to the point where I was actually business viable. It was looking around at the market, and in the event space, there was a lot of attempts and there was a lot of movement towards these far more intimate, targeted events, and a lot of companies were leaning in this direction. They were inspired by a couple of pioneers who had done and really benefited from these dinner discussions or founder discussions or founder roundtables, and they'd use that as part of a pillar of their marketing strategy. I think Mark Benioff in a book regarding Salesforce wrote a whole chapter specifically on dinner discussions and how that was really used as his primary channel for growing Salesforce. Consultative relationship building. They would just go to each city around the States and run a founders dinner. So yeah, this was a trend at the time that I just jumped on. And I'd actually started doing it with someone else who threw me out of his company, and then did it myself and did it better. And this is where we're at now.
Love it. First of all, so thanks for walking us all through this. It's pretty cool what you do, and people can go to ortusclub.com to learn more. It's ORTUS club.com. And Sam, I just want to be the first one to thank you. Thanks for sharing your journey and your knowledge with everyone.
Great. I really enjoyed that, Jeremy. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.